If we're talking about some of the most anticipated game releases for the year 2024, I can assure you that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is on top of that list for many people, for a good reason. It is simply undeniable how much hype there was and still is around this game. But of course, when something's really hyped up and people have insane expectations for it, there's a chance that it may fall short. Is this the case with Rebirth? As you can clearly see from the general consensus from both critics and other gamers alike, and as you can now hear from me, the most official, trustworthy, objective critic wannabe on YouTube, this game is an absolute banger.
Wow, just look at it all. It's so green. Even after everything we've done to it, it's still going strong.
It may look that way, but in reality, it's barely hanging on.
They say she's a monster, that she can peer inside you, into the very depths of your soul, that she can become those you hate, those you fear, those you love.
You burned my village!
So, who is she?
Before I start going into detail, I know that this game's success has got many people into the Final Fantasy franchise for the first time, and I believe that many of my viewers as well may not be familiar with it. In fact, I was not really familiar with it either until a few months ago when I played the first part of this 2B trilogy. For those that this wasn't obvious to already, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is a direct sequel to Final Fantasy VII Remake. This is part 2 of 3. And with that said, I will not only try to avoid spoilers for Rebirth, I will also want to do my best in avoiding spoilers for part 1. Since we're talking about part 2 here, it may be impossible to avoid all spoilers for Remake, so just bear that in mind. There may be some spoilers for that game slipping through the cracks, but I will do my absolute best to keep those spoilers at a minimum. Also, of course, the gameplay footage shown in the background is from the first few hours of Rebirth, as well as trailer footage of course, so if you consider those to be too much of a spoiler, leave the video on in a background or something and listen to it like you'd be listening to a podcast. Rebirth is a massive game. I personally haven't finished it yet, although I've played a crap ton of it, and with that I consider myself ready to review it now. Of course, there is a chance that it somehow drops the ball at the end, but I heavily doubt that. I am confident that this game is a banger through and through. The best place to start covering this is probably the story, as I personally feel like that is the highlight of this game and part 1 of course. Rebirth takes place right where Remake left off. You're out of the city of Midgar and are free to explore the outside world. This definitely makes the game feel thematically and visually quite different than the first one. Now you're seeing grass and nature everywhere, instead of the city's slums. I think it's nice to shake up things from time to time in that sense, and it works really well here. The characters I feel like are just some of the best characters I've seen in a video game in a good while. They were good earlier, and they get more development and screen time here in Rebirth, making them even better than they were before. The main gang, Cloud, Tifa, Barret and Aerith, are better than ever, at least in the Remake trilogy, and they are wonderfully brought to life by some really stellar voice acting from the cast. This game also introduces new characters, and I think they also do a great job playing their part in the story, but I don't want to dive too deep into that to avoid spoilers. Overall, the story is just super well built. It has a lot of moving parts and it may feel confusing and outright bizarre at times, but every piece still fits nicely together in the end. In terms of gameplay, if you have played Remake, you will feel right at home with Rebirth. The core gameplay remains unchanged, and Rebirth adds a decent amount on top of it. If you're one of those people that haven't played Remake, the gameplay is, in my opinion, a perfect mix of hack and slash and turn-based combat. You can run around and smash buttons for some small damage, which alone works for weaker enemy encounters, but with bigger enemy groups and boss fights especially, using all tools in your disposal is a requirement for victory. So the way it works is that with every quote-unquote normal hit you get on an enemy, you fill up a meter for each character, and when it's filled enough, you can land some of your actual skills that you activate with an additional menu, which also pauses the combat, creating that turn-based feeling. In addition to your skills, you also have spells, summons, limit abilities, and as a new addition for Rebirth, synergy attacks, which allows you to kind of combine two of your team members' strengths to deliver a powerful attack. With all these systems combined, as well as having to manage up to 3 characters at once, and being able to manage their materia, weapons, and upgrades, the gameplay gets often really chaotic, sometimes really strategical, and above all, really fun and satisfying. As another new addition for Rebirth specifically is that it adds new playable characters. Without going too in depth, at least Red 13 from the first game is now playable, as well as Yuffie from the Intermission DLC. New characters of course bring new skills and playstyles on the table, allowing you to customize your style of combat even further. Moving into some non-combat additions that Rebirth adds, the main thing that comes to mind is these partly open world sections. The game isn't fully open world, but some of the areas you explore are small open world areas that of course bring their own good old open world side content. This mainly consists of climbing towers, pulling levers, fighting groups of enemies in a specific way, and so on. It's nothing mind-blowing or new, but it's there for people that want to do more in the world, and while I know for a fact that I won't be doing all of the side content, even I have tackled quite a bit of these activities on the side as I've been exploring these new areas. Of course, these side activities aren't the only content in these open areas. You've still got some regular side quests that usually are more interesting, at least to me. You can also now traverse these open parts on a chocobo, which allows you to move from a place to another faster. Definitely a nice addition there. Another new mechanic that Rebirth adds is item crafting. I can't really tell for a fact if this is a useful addition. Personally, I haven't been using it that much, but maybe you can do some cool stuff with it. Rebirth also features a crap ton of minigames, and I really mean a crap ton. For example, the card game that's added, Queen's Blood, has been way more entertaining than I could have ever expected. It's small things like this that not only make the world feel more alive, but also more interactive. Apparently, Square Enix has claimed that you should be able to play Rebirth just fine without having played Remake. Now this is a claim that I really don't agree with. I heavily, from the bottom of my heart, recommend Rebirth, but only to those who have played Part 1 beforehand. Like I said in the beginning of this review, Rebirth is a direct sequel. It picks up right where Remake left off. You'd be very confused playing Rebirth without any prior knowledge of the world and its characters. So please, do yourself a favor and play Remake first. You won't regret it, that game is also awesome. Is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth Game of the Year, like my beautiful thumbnail raised that question? Of course it's too early to tell, obviously. But I do firmly believe that Rebirth is going to be, at the very least, a damn strong competitor. We're talking about an experience extremely fun, extremely enjoyable, and extremely memorable. I'll be looking out for the final part of this trilogy very optimistically, and if that game manages to have the quality of the first two, I can safely say that the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy is going to be one of the best video game trilogies ever made.